In September of 2012, Illinois issued an executive order. Governor Quinn issued executive order number 3, which required, among other things, for our agencies to adopt a cloud-first policy that's modeled on the federal government's policy that's been in place for over a year now. And what it simply requires is that agencies making technology investments have to consider all options in the marketplace, including cloud-based options, and if they are feasible, adopt them. And the purpose of that is to achieve agility, flexibility, innovation, and most importantly, cost savings. So we kind of have a couple of deficits. One is a budgetary deficit, one of them is a personnel deficit. So we have to think about infrastructure, platform, and software as a service that we procure from a marketplace than as something we deliver to ourselves. It's kind of a situation of a square peg in a round hole. So state procurement practices, state personnel practices, state budgeting practices are developed on certain assumptions which don't include software, platform, and infrastructure as a subscription-based service. The budgeting models and acquisition models aren't designed to allow us to access a marketplace where those things are available. So whenever you try to enter into these kinds of arrangements, you're trying to make a large foot fit into an ill-fitting shoe, so to speak. We have to redesign the paradigm for acquisition, budgeting, structure, organization, personnel to capture the full benefit of the cloud. But the real benefit to us has been we have agencies that are severely underfunded, that can't afford the rates that our internal data center charges for infrastructure services, and are looking for low-cost, agile, reliable solutions. The cloud has been a game changer and a lifesaver for many of them. We're looking at a cloud-based arrangement for our Department of Revenue to actually utilize a private cloud through an intergovernmental agreement at the University of Illinois. We have moved our offender tracking system, which is a cloud-based CRM tracking system, to a cloud environment, Microsoft's cloud. We're looking at moving our Department of Children and Family Services to a cloud environment. That would be the public cloud. So we've had a number of initial forays, and of course our open data site is a cloud-hosted solution, which is on the Socrata platform. So we've had a couple of forays into the cloud marketplace. We feel that it's been very successful. A couple challenges are, like I said, procurement, budgeting, personnel. And then we also have to think about standard form contract terms and conditions. So this is a new kind of solution, and we need to think about what our risks are. So I think it's a big concern. Security is something that obviously is at the top of our mind. And it's a little bit of a risk factor because security concerns and standards for cloud-based computing for public sector, it's kind of ill-defined territory. So we are conscious of the fact that we're blazing some trails. There are some basic things that give us some comfort. For example, in looking at the tax data, the federal tax data that our Department of Revenue uses, we are substantially certain that the cloud solution that the U of I is going to offer us is more likely and more compliant with the federal auditing and accounting standards, federal cybersecurity standards for the utilization of federal income tax data. So we actually think that in some instances there's a definable market improvement, and that's based in national standards promulgated by the federal government, national associations, etc. The other thing that keeps us that we keep in mind is that our internal infrastructure bureau has a really difficult time managing security risks today, managing operational risks today. So when we talk about the comparative risks of moving to the cloud, you shouldn't assume that the status quo is a risk-free proposition. It's not. Having said that, there are multiple risks apart from data security, right? There's financial risk, there's technical risk, there's contractual risk, and a lot of those things, it's kind of like a new surgical procedure, right? When they first did LASIK, they didn't know how people would react 20 years after the surgery, and we won't know until 20 years have elapsed. So undoubtedly there will be some risks, including cybersecurity risks, that we're not fully aware of. But one last point on that. When you have all of your infrastructure and all of your data in a single solitary data center, that means that everything in theory is susceptible to risks, physical risks, cyber risks. You could think of a cloud-based approach to infrastructure, software, and platform as a risk mitigation strategy in the sense that it diversifies where your data and where your computing power is located. And so like an investment portfolio, one way to manage volatility is to diversify. So we think that within appropriate safeguards, that a cloud-based approach for all the agencies could actually improve security by not having all of our eggs in one basket. The thing that is really driving cloud is the economics. It's also the thing that's kind of hampering it, and let me explain what I mean. The overhead costs of managing a function internal to government are increasing at a rate that's faster than inflation and faster than revenue sources grow. The primary component of that is personnel. To give you an example, our workforce is about 97% unionized, which is probably the highest of any public sector entity in America. When we figure the payroll costs for each employee, if you took the salary as a 100% and then you added in pension, health care, union mandated wage increases, etc., you arrive at a figure of an annual yearly cost per employee of 190% of salary. So in other words, it's about 1.9 or nearly 2x as compared to salary, what is the total cost per person. And that's something that grows exponentially at a rate faster than inflation. What that means is that the status quo, which is primarily reliant on an internal data center, is not sustainable for the reasons that I just mentioned. So what's driving agencies to the cloud is the legislature is not appropriating sufficient money for them to pay the chargeback fees to our infrastructure bureau to receive service, which frankly a lot of agencies are not satisfied with. So the market is incredibly attractive to them. The costs for email inboxes, for example, are less than half in a cloud environment than what our infrastructure bureau provides. In other areas of service, it's a similar differential. At the same time, we have a different problem, which is that we have operational strains, as I mentioned, but we also have a little bit of capital, right? We have some capital resources, and what's making that available is the interest rate environment, which is very, very low, very, very favorable. So even like a state like Illinois, which has had some credit problems and some downgrades and some negative watch list ratings, we're still able to access capital markets at a reasonably low rate of interest. That's enabled us, thankfully, to borrow money to strategically invest in technology. But capital dollars are very, very difficult to allocate effectively to SaaS solutions, for example, because it's a subscription model. It's really a model that's designed to affect the operational budget. So we've had to spend a fair amount of time thinking of creative ways to utilize capital dollars as part of a cloud strategy, and it's kind of tricky. So that's been an impediment. So the economics are both a great driver and a great roadblock. We have made a conscious decision with our Governor's Office of Management and Budget and our capital management team that a $50 million bond issuance, which we made in September of 2012, which is $50 million of 10-year debt specifically for information technology, this is manna from heaven for a lot of agencies that are starved for investment. And we have made a policy commitment that in the allocation of those resources, they will be strategically invested in cost savings opportunity. So the result of any project has to be, a perceptible systems improvement, modernization, better customer service, etc. But it's also got to demonstrate a sustainable cost structure and savings over the status quo, which is a demanding standard that has been difficult to enforce because it's the first time anybody's really done that in the state. Typically what we've done is we've just taken agency project plans and their silos at face value and just committed resources. We've decided that one of the problems has been that the consumption of technology has always been driven by this notion that consumption of technology is always a cost savings. And what we found is that the life cycle costs of a new system probably are exceeding by a factor of 4 to 1 the initial implementation costs. So people have purchased with capital dollars, which are relatively easy to get, a new system on the theory that any technology saves money, and they've encumbered the state or government that they're working for, an amount of money that's 4 times the initial investment. So what we've tried to do is to have a budgeting perspective that's longer term and that requires accountability at the outset for what the cost structure is going to be for any new system investment. And so that's helped to drive some savings. So it's about allowing for certain kinds of consumption, but being very, very disciplined about how we approach that consumption, and then using the incentive capital money as a way to promote cooperation with that. So it's just going to the market at the right time and the right place and making sure that agencies are situated to see technology as a cost savings device. It's challenging. It's challenging because the role of the executive has traditionally been to simply validate whatever people wanted to do. I think that anything that automates business processes has a great chance of saving money, because our biggest cost structure are state employees, quite frankly. So one of the things that we're investing in now is an integrated eligibility system for Medicaid, TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, and SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We're going to get 90% federal matching dollars on that project. It's about a $150 million initiative scheduled for deployment in October of 13, which is going to, in theory, and when we're successful, revolutionize what currently is a paper-based, multi-step, tortuously complicated process for people becoming eligible for the Medicaid program. It involves numerous caseworkers, numerous levels of oversight. And so what our new eligibility system will allow is for people to go online and to determine eligibility automatically through a PC or a mobile device. And we think that's really exciting. We think it'll reduce strain on the agency operating budgets and save money, at least on the administrative side. The nice thing about the revolution in technology and economics related to cloud computing over the last few years is that it has enabled cash-strapped people to consume very, very powerful, very modern, very innovative technologies at a relatively low cost structure. So things that have been prohibitively expensive or things that have been technologically impossible are now suddenly available. And that, combined with the constriction in resources due to the recession, has kind of forced us to have some innovation. Another thing that's been really destabilizing to the environment and has promoted some innovation, although we have to see this through, is Obamacare. So the Obama administration has been progressive, I think, in the best way that they can on this subject by providing incentive-based funding for systems implementation and having a very liberal approach to that, being very, very open to new ideas and to promoting states. So that's been helpful to a degree. Having deadlines for completing certain projects, like the October deadline for Medicaid eligibility, for promoting collaboration and consensus standards among states. So those things have also been incentives, and that's been a great help. But I think the primary thing has been the desire of the people in our state and in the General Assembly to have more transparency, to have more openness and accountability, and to use technology in a visible, collaborative way to drive savings, efficiency, and good government. That's been the overwhelming sentiment in our political culture, and we've tried to meet that as best we can. But that's been a great help in trying to get innovative technology installed.